took it back to my company, and I put a screening on for all the staff and the management. And they watched the film, and I went back to my office. And after the film, they came to my office. I said, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? It's like a really cool film. They said, Nick, we have watched the film, and if you were not our boss, we would fire you. So what I learned to that is it's really important to be boss. That's, people, they ignore this, they get jobs and they have like, people pay them. But it is so much preferable if you can be boss. We started out in production with a company of Walls, Neil Jordan's first film called The Cinema, but second film because he made a wonderful film called Angel before that. We moved on to make what we thought was a modern musical called Absolute Beginners with David Bowie. I remember this film, it went completely over budget. Well, actually it didn't go over budget. We budgeted it for £8 million. We raised £8 million, which is what, 12 million euro. And no, we only raised £6 million, so we just changed the figures in the budget. We didn't actually change anything about the production. So when it eventually went over budget, for us it wasn't really over budget. But we had a premiere for it with Princess Anne, the British Princess Anne. And when we sat down and the film begins, the two protagonists, or the protagonist and antagonist, the two leads, the young kids and the leads, were walking over this bridge, and Princess Anne, she said to me, because I was sitting next to her as the producer and distributor, she said to me, Nick, that bridge was not there in 1959, which is when the movie Absolute Beginners was set in 1959. I said, yeah, it was there. She said, Nick, do not argue with me. So I thought she was talking like, you know, like royalty to peasant. But I kept on going, and I said, no, I was definitely there. We had very good researchers. We would never make a big mistake. We would have a bridge that was built after 1959 in a film which is set in 1959. She said, Nick, do not argue with me. I know because I opened it. So I learned the importance of social skills and research. And it's so important. I tell my students all the time, please research people. And it's so easy to research it today with the internet. You know, you can find blackmail now is impossible, because on the internet you can find out everything about everybody. And there is no excuse when you go to meet people not to know everything about them. You know, not to know that the New York governor was dating very expensive call girls. You should know those things when you go and see him. You should know everything about things. So research to me is just fundamental. And the better prepared you are, the better. And we went on and we made a very low budget, kind of micro budget film called Brezhnev. Wonderful film about two girls picking up two Russian sailors in Liverpool. Liverpool, as you know, is very famous for the European Cup and its football team, but it's also famous for because of all the young people there. They're very famous for stealing things. For some reason they have this reputation for stealing. I was going to tell a joke, I said, but I don't know if I have time. It was after the Champions League match last week, when Liverpool beat Inter Milan, Inter Milan, and they are driving back in their van to England, and there was a very nasty crash, and they are all killed, these Liverpudlian football fans. And so they go to heaven, and they get outside the pearly gates. You know, we have these gates made of pearls and entrance to heaven. And St. Peter is there, and they say, can we come into heaven? And St. Peter says, oh, we are very full at the moment. We're very full at the moment, so I have to go and talk to God. So he goes up to talk to God and have a little yappa. And then he comes back, and then he shouts back to God. He says, they're gone. God says, what? The people from Liverpool are gone? He said, no, the pearly gates are gone. So anyway, I got a letter to Brezhnev, that was it. And we did a lovely film, another Neil Jordan film called Mona Lisa with Bob Hoskins, who was nominated for an Oscar on it. He won the Best Actor prize in Cannes, and I always remember, I learned a love lesson for that, because I remember my partner Stephen Woolley, we were on location, and Stephen Woolley was sitting on the wall, and George Harrison, the ex-Beatle, the late Beatle, the late ex-Beatle, I don't know if you can be late in the minutes, but anyway, some kind of a Beatle, was sitting on the wall as well. Steve, he was only 20, and he saw one of our young actresses in the film walking across the set. And George saw his eyes follow her. And I heard him lean over to Steve and say, "Stephen, executive producers first." And from what I learned from that was the importance of seniority in this business. And he certainly had that. And we do a lot of royal premieres in the UK because they're a very good way of promoting and getting a lot of press for your film. And, we were doing a film, the name of which has just escaped me. When Harry Met Sally, there we go. American film, did a lot of big business, and we launched it with a big royal premiere in London's Leicester Square. And we had Princess Diana at that time was a guest. And what we had decided to do, because in When Harry Met Sally, the actress does a fantastic faked orgasm in this cafe. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the film. And it's a really fantastic sort of performance. It looked very real to me, actually, but a fantastic sort of performance. It looked very real to me, actually, but it's a faked orgasm in a cafe. And so we put Princess Diana in the circle, and around her we put all the British tabloid press. Normally you would put around Princess Diana all of the establishment people from British society. But we put them all downstairs, we put the tabloid press around, because we knew that for the British tabloids to be able to have the word fake orgasm and Princess Diana in the same headline would get us every front page in the country, and in every paper and on every news program. And that's what we did. And what I learned from that is you've got to use everything you've got. We have a phrase in English: you have to be shameless if you're a producer. You can pretend to have taste, you can pretend to be a cool guy, you can pretend to do all these things, but at the end of the day, you really have to be shameless because there are so many films made, you know, several thousand films made around the world every year. To get your one film up there and ahead of the competition is absolutely fundamental. And sometimes that will be subtle things, but often it's just a question of being shameless. And yeah, this was, and then we made a film called The Crying Game, which, I mean, I missed out lots of films, but just moving on, because we don't have too much time. It was in the late 80s, and we had two films in production, one in production in Africa, and the other one with Jeremy Irons in England. And Neil Jordan wanted to make this film, which at that time was called Soldier's Wife. And it was kind of a problem because we were running out of money, so we had two films in production, and always they will tell you in business school, if you have two things going on, you shouldn't take on more than you can chew. My view always has been, if the thing that is coming in here is better than the two things you are doing already, then you always take it on. And thank God we did. And that film turned out to be The Crying Game, turned out to be, for many years, the biggest taking independently distributed independent movie in America, and nominated for 6 Oscars. And at the same time, we were running out of money, and we had a lot of creditors. So the lessons that I learned is you don't stop just because you are making 2 other films. I think Bowney knows that, you know, he's always making at least 13 films at the same time. And you don't stop just because the creditors want their money back. But I didn't manage to sort that out, so we went bankrupt, which is not much fun, just in case you haven't done it yet. It really did become a crying game, and was a bit of a disaster, but with the nominations. So I sort of learned that it was pretty savage, and then it was pretty good. And the great thing about Americans, I know that a lot of people have problems with Americans. I was married to, my first wife was American and half Swedish, terrible combination. But they were, no, she's lovely. She's married to a Swedish count now, and seems to own half of southern Sweden. But what I learned from this was that if people believe you can deliver interesting films to them that are well crafted, that have a chance to find an audience, then Americans will always continue to do business with you, because there is such a history of bankruptcy in the entertainment business generally, and in the film business specifically, and all the way back to St. Goldwyn, people have gone bust, and then reinvented themselves. So it wasn't too bad. So we started a new company called Scala Productions. Our first film was a film called Backbeat. My favourite scene in Backbeat is a scene which never made it, actually, into the final cut of the movie, because I thought that I liked it because it did not portray the stereotypical German thing, because there was a scene where Stuart Sutcliffe, the main fifth Beatle who sadly died, is trying to court and seduce this very advanced for her time German girl who was really 10 years ahead of her time in social wars. This is back in the late 50s, and she was more like someone from the late 60s. And I remember in the script, Stuart Sutcliffe says to Astrid, says, look, you know, my father from Liverpool, he said, told me there's only one problem with your Germans. I'm sure we have some German people in the audience. He told me that you Germans have no sense of humour. So she paused for a moment and she said, but we bombed Liverpool. Sorry, Liverpool. It's only written by an Australian, that joke, I understand. But we did a film called Dark Blood, which starred River Phoenix. This film never made it the end because, very sadly, River Phoenix died halfway through the picture of a drug overdose, nothing to do with me. But I did take some responsibility for his death, because I felt that the way the movie got financed, I was at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was very early one morning, and I was running to my first meeting at the Majestic Hotel, and then, I zoomed through the doors, I jumped into this lift, and the lift was like really full, and then this beautiful Italian actress got into the lift, and then Harvey Weinstein got in the lift. Now, Harvey Weinstein is not a thin man. And then the doors were closed, but the lift would not go up because Harvey was too heavy. So the doors opened again, and Harvey looked right, so you think I'm getting out? And I went, no. And in order to impress the Italian actress, I thought I would show her the good manners of a well-brought-up Englishman. And I said, don't worry everybody, even though my meeting is on the 6th floor, I am going to get out of the lift and take the stairs. So at which point I got out of the lift and the doors closed, and as I'm going up the stairs, I meet the head of New Line Pictures, Bob Shea, who is coming down, and he says, mate, we love this River Phoenix movie, and come in the bar, I have all my executives now, we can make a deal. And literally half an hour later, I have a deal for $7 million, and we were able to start the film. And it was only because I stepped out the lift, and sometimes I feel if I had not stepped out the lift that day, and made Harvey step out the lift, then we wouldn't have made that film, and River Phoenix would not have died. But it was very sad, because I think we shot the movie in the desert in America, and I think one of the reasons he died was because there were not any drugs in this bit of the desert. So when he went back to Los Angeles, having too much killed him. But anyway, that's another story. And that was the fastest financing I ever did. But what I learned is that politeness pays, but can also be a killer. I am a big football fan. I think lots of people know this. I support the best French team in Europe called Arsenal, even has a French name, but it's based in North London. And we made a film about Arsenal called Fever Pitch, which is one of the best films. It's a very bad film cinematically, but it's one of the best films about what it feels like to be a fan. So if you are not a fan of anything, you will hate this film, because it will be incomprehensible to you. But it was a wonderful film based on Nick Hornby's first book. And I remember being in we were filming in the Arsenal Stadium, and we had the old players coming out for a match that happened 20 years ago. And then we had the tiny little bit of the stadium in costume for the 1970s. And the production manager said, Nick, you should stay and be in the crowd. I said, look, I'm a very busy man, I can't stay and be an extra. And he was very persistent. And I said, why are you being so persistent? He said, because you are the only person in the whole stadium who still has a genuine 1970s hairstyle. Then we did a film called Little Voice, where Brenda Blethyn played the lead role and was nominated for an Oscar and won a Grammy. not a Grammy, a Golden Globe, and it won a lot of other awards. It was very successful in the UK, but not anywhere else in the world. And that was quite an interesting journey for a producer, because it started out as a successful stage play in London's West End. And we could, because it was a very successful stage play, we didn't have enough money to buy the rights. So we phoned up Harvey Weinstein and told him to fly in to watch the play and to buy the rights for us to produce. So Harvey said, sure, mate, Steve, we'll do that. So he flew in, he saw the play, he loved it, he bought the rights, and then he gave them to another producer. Which means always never trust your best friend. But then he wanted to reset it in America, and he wanted to have Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow item at the time. And the film would never work set in America because of what it's about. But it took about 5 years, and eventually we got it back, and we still made it for Harvey, and then it did very well. Later on, I did a film called Last Orders. I had decided that, well, I'll come on to that later, but the great thing about, I had decided that, this is like 10 and 15 years ago, before everybody was writing about it, that there were more and more old people. And none of my friends or young filmmakers want to make films for old people. They want to make cutting-edge, trendy, films for teenagers or people in the early 20s, even though there are less and less of those people in most Western countries, and there are more and more old people. And also, I never made a film that my mother would like. And so I decided to concentrate and look for material that would appeal to people over 50. And the first one was a film called Last Orders. And a great thing with films like this is that they can have the best cast. So I had this cast of Bob Hoskins, of Michael Caine, of Tom Courtenay, of Helen Mirren, of Ray Winston, David Hemmings. These were my real heroes, all in the same film. And then the film is set mainly in pubs, in British pubs. So it was a dream kind of film for me. But what was interesting about it, I remember we premiered it in Toronto on the night before September the 11th, when the planes crashed into the Twin Towers. And the following morning we had all been out very late, celebrating a fantastic screening and a big American deal. And we woke up to find out these planes had crashed into the Twin Towers. And I remember saying to my Canadian friend, do you think we are safe here in Toronto? And she said, Nick, when I asked the same question to my father during the Cold War, he told me, you do not have to worry. She said, he told me that, darling, we will only get hit if they miss. Did a film called Calendar Girls, a group of middle-aged women with terrible bodies posing for a photograph to raise money for charity for cancer. But it was a wonderful performance of those wonderful actors. And both these projects were brought to me by my one by an ex-wife and one by an ex-girlfriend. And the lesson that I learned from this was always stay friends with your exes. Not just for the children, but it can be very good for business. And the other thing is always to look at how the market really is. People, they tell you, read in Variety, the market is this way. You read in Screen International, the market is that way. You come to things like this, and they tell you the market is X. But the only real way to know the market, as Uli Felsberg was telling me, his father, a very successful investor, he never read any financial papers, but he would invest in a phone company, if he saw everybody was using that mobile phone in the streets. And for me, it's you have to look at how things really are, as opposed to how the world tells you they think they are. Because at the end of the day, those are just journalists, and we know how stupid journalists are. So, they are writing things, and so on. The best thing is to look into the streets and see how things really are. And also to look at a market and I think a lot of people will make the market be the way they want it to be so they can make the film that they want to make. And I think it's great they make the film they want to make, but I think the most important thing is to look at how things really are. And then I have the record for the oldest actresses in a movie, in a little movie called Ladies in Lavender, which did fantastic business around the English-speaking world. And it was brilliant because on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays it would do more business than the big Hollywood movies, because that's when all the old ladies go out to the cinema, because they don't like to go on Saturday nights because the young people are too loud, they eat too much popcorn and so on. So there is a great market. But I think also is in life you need luck. You know, I definitely think there are some people in life that just the luck doesn't come. I remember an Irish friend of mine, Michael Garland, was having a hard time as a producer, and I remember saying to him, I said, Michael, you know, you're not having much luck. And he was Irish, of course, and he thought about it. He said, no, Nick, you're wrong there. You know, I do have a lot of luck. It's just all bad. Writing. Well, of course, in British culture, writing is absolutely fundamental to what we do. It's not all cinema. I think there are many genres of cinema, many countries' cinematic traditions do not start with the script. I know the European Union would like all cinema to start with a script, but it doesn't. You know, there are great films made that are written on the backs of envelopes, that are on 3-4 pages, and so on. But in the English-speaking culture, the script, because of the kind of literary and theatre background, is very important. And as I tell my students, we need writers, we need both incisors and grinders. But it's funny because everybody wants to write these days. You know, my sister is trying to write. I think my 87-year-old mother mentioned it the other day that she might write something. But all the way back to Juvenal, you know, back in the Roman times, they also had the same disease. But my favourite thing about writing is J.P. Don Levy is a writer of The Gingerbread Man and the novel. And when he was asked what writing was all about, he talked for a moment and he said, you know, he was Irish as well actually, saying, you know what writing is all about? It's turning the worst moments of your life into money. And I tell that to my students because I say, if you're going to be a proper writer, you must be a professional writer and you must be paid for what you do. Otherwise, in my opinion, you're not a writer. And therefore, you should be turning the worst or the best moments of your life into money. It is very important that they come out and start making a living as a writer instead of being, you know, in the back room of their house living off their wife, or vice versa. So I use this Mark Twain, one of the great American humorists. He, for me, has written the best 3 or 4 pages about storytelling, English language style storytelling that I have come across. He wrote it 150 years ago, and I still think it's the best short piece of writing about storytelling, and it's called the Mark Twain's, I think, 26 Rules of Literary Composition. And what had happened was that J. Fenimore Cooper, an American novelist, had written a novel. J. Fenimore Cooper wrote Last of the Mohicans, but he'd written another novel called The Deerslayer that Mark Twain thought was the biggest piece of rubbish ever written. And he wrote a little critical piece just going through why it was a rubbish novel. And these are some of the rules. I'm going to, actually it's 19, sorry, not 26. So these rules require that a tale, a story for us, shall accomplish something and arrive somewhere. And this book doesn't do that. They require the episodes of a tale are all the fundamental part of that tale. But my favourite one is they require that the personages, what we would call characters, in a tale should be alive, except in the case of corpses. And always the audience can tell the difference. And finally, my other favourite one requires that the personages, characters we would call them nowadays, both dead and alive, shall have a sufficient reason to be there. So often you are reading scripts and you think, what is this character doing here? Or this is not really even a character, it's just a name of someone and some dialogue. And basically anything you can put a line through in a script, you should put a line through, unless it meets these various things. These are just some of my own philosophy of why you get involved in a movie. I always say there's the opportunistic, cheap movie. It's really cheap. You're able to put it together quickly. And Letter to Brezhnev, Hardware, various movies that have done very well for me were just that. And then there's what I call the girlfriend movie. Those are the ones that the ex-girlfriends have bought me. There's a movie that you can't say no to. That would be like a Last Orders, or it may be just someone who's such a pain in the arse that eventually you get involved in that movie. But I have now stopped doing that. But when I was younger, I sometimes got involved. The pitch movie, of course, people, I'm going to come on to pitching later. What I call the pop song movie, I mean, this is, I think, an ignored area because the film business hates the record business. And they would never want to think that the record business is actually selling the tickets to their crap film. And there are so many films that you see are doing big box office, and then you look and see what is number one, and you can see The Crying Game was really helped by the success of the record. Crying Game, it went into the top 5 of the charts around the world, and that means that it's on the radio and every day your film is being mentioned. And so we always looked in our movies to see there's an opportunity to have a major hit song. All people's movies we talked about, unfinished movies, there's like Edit of Brezhnev, someone has shot part of it and they can't finish it, and you get involved to help them finish it. Critics movie, of course, I got involved in Terence Davis' movie, great English author, because, you know, he was a critic's favourite, and then, of course, they hated the movie, so it doesn't always work. Performance movie, this is very big for me, that I think a lot of people seem to ignore. You never hear it talked about. One of the number one reasons to get involved in a movie is because there's the opportunity there for one or more great performances. Because the great performance attracts the great actor. Not the star, but the great actor. And if they then have a great performance, you can have a kind of weakish film around the periphery of it. But if you have the opportunity for an incredible performance at the centre, and then it helps at the box office, because even with the film itself is not winning prizes or getting attention, the performances. And people in history have always paid money since cavemen put dancing girls outside of their caves, to attract other cavemen and charge them money. So performances have been absolutely central to every form of entertainment. And I think sometimes we ignore that when we put our bills. The director movie, well, of course, you're all from continental Europe, so you'll know about that. And of course the best-selling book or play movie, which for me obviously is great because you have a story, you know the public love it, you know they love the characters, and so your job really is to realise that. And then there's what I call the zeitgeist movie. And these you can't make it up front, but I think that Crying Game or Middle America was a zeitgeist movie in the sense that it tapped into something in American men's fear of sleeping with someone of their own sex by mistake, a very deep fear. It was during the time of the liberation and the gay movement and so on. I think that the Blair Witch, for me, is a zeitgeist movie. The reason it does such huge business is not just about the internet. It was because it was the majority of the American population lived in these big cities. Those big city people are not frightened by crimes in the hood, by burglaries, by robberies, by violence, by guns. But you put them in a big forest, and they're frightened shitless. So they all went to the film with the big forest so they could be frightened shitless, because they're not frightened shitless by their own hoods that they live in. And that to me is why this film is so successful. It hit a zeitgeist in society. And of course there are high concepts. Crying Game is a high concept movie. Boy meets girl who turns out not to be a girl. And there's a little bit of marketing here. This friend of mine sent me this from Mumbai. Of course, she's an old Indian lady. She has no teeth at all. And so many people are aiming their movies at completely the wrong audience. I do my little understand society. Some of you might have heard this from me before. But I'll sort of, socialism, you know this. You have 2 cows and you give one to your neighbor. Communism, you have 2 cows, the government takes both but gives you some milk. Nazism, you have 2 cows, the government takes both and shoots you. American corporation, you have 2 cows, you sell one and you force the other to produce the milk of 4 cows. Later you hire a consultant to analyse why it dropped dead. The French corporation, you have 2 cows, but you go on strike for a third. Italian corporation, you have 2 cows, but you have no idea where they are. Indian corporation, you have 2 cows and you worship them. I missed out the British one because it's so obvious. You have 2 cows and they're both mad. Microsoft, you have 2 cows, you patent both and sue anyone who has them. And in Hollywood, of course, you have 2 cows, you give them utter implants, you teach them how to bullet dodge, wall climb and shoot milk out of their udders on the farm. And bit of silliness. These are a few things I tell my students. The film and television industry is a dog-eat-dog. Actually, it's worse than that. It's a dog does not return other dogs' emails industry. You know, this is my favourite one. There's someone who turned in a script last year, and the financiers did not change one word, and the one word they did not change was on page 87. What do you think about that? And as Steve Martin said, I encourage my students to go to Hollywood because it's the only place where you can get fired by someone wearing a baseball cap and a Hawaiian shirt. It's one of my favourite quotes because everybody says that cinema is a collaborative exercise. Bullshit. What we collaborators in my parents' generation is shoot them. You know, collaborators has a very negative kind of smell to it. We use the word in my school engagement, which is also French, engagement, because engagement is a positive thing. If you want to engage with someone, you have to go up to them, you have to start talking to them. It's not kind of collaborating, arms around the shoulders, aren't we all super type of stuff. So we got rid of the word collaboration. I use this word engagement. I want my students, and indeed anybody, to do good work has to engage, you know, obviously with society, with their craft, with the industry, with politics, with culture, with themselves, with the people around them, and so on. Just a few things you need to know about us producers, but of course you're all producers here, so you'll know this already. When a producer sees the light at the end of the tunnel, we always add more tunnel. And when a producer sees a bridge, I can see you looking at me there. You know, we always double cross it. And of course, I just tell my little story about a producer, director, and writer on a desert island. And they are stranded there, and the genie comes up to them and says, "You have one wish each." So the director, she says, "Look, I'm doing my first ever Hollywood film. I have to get to Los Angeles and get the casting going and sign it up." Boom, she's gone. And the writer says, "My wife, she's having a baby at home. I have to be there for the birth. I have to get back to the Cotswolds in England." Boom, he's gone. And the producer says, "I only have one wish." "What do you mean I only have one wish?" "Yeah, I only have one wish." Says, "In that case, get them both back here right now." A few things I learned in Europe. I was telling a few of them last night. I'm not actually the chairman anymore. It's an old slide. I'm the vice chairman, which is a much better job. You have all the vice and none of the chairing. But the European Film Awards have now been going 20 years. They've been right down on their bum. They've been up. Now they are kind of on a decent platter. Next year the awards will be in Copenhagen. You know, they were founded by the late Ingmar Bergman and Wim Wenders as well, and he is also, of course, the president. But it's very good being the chairman or vice chairman of the European Film Academy because I got to know a lot of things about Europe, continental Europe especially, that a lot of people don't know. For instance, not a lot of people know that when the wall collapsed in Berlin, Berlin got the best taxi service in the world. And the reason was that all of the Stasi police who had got fired when it was united Germany, got jobs as taxi drivers. And it was fantastic. You would jump into a cab, tell them the name of the person you want to go to, and they know where they live. Selling. This is very American style selling, but I have to say I believe them. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them again, and ask for some action. And there's nothing more effective. So many people, they dance around the table when they are trying to sell something. Pitching. I don't like the word pitching, by the way, because I think that it gives the wrong impression. I think it's a specifically American thing, and people who are not Americans should not pitch. I call it, you know, talking. That what they mean by pitching is what they say to my students, that talk about your project. But when you are talking about your project, talk about the things about your project that the person you are talking to might be interested in. Not the things that you are interested in only. And you must see, but so just talking about, and if you have a short amount of time to talk about your project in, then obviously you want to concentrate on the things that are important and appealing to the person you're talking to. But it's not pitching, because as soon as you're pitching, people think they are acting. As soon as you are acting, you are not being genuine. So for me, it's really important that people just talk clearly, succinctly, put the main points in about their project when they are talking, whether they're talking to someone to get a writer for it, or a director, or an actor, or to get money. But this is a nice Anthony Minghella thing. Pitching is selling, pitching is talking, pitching is dating. And Anthony Minghella said 3 things that writers are really bad. And he said the other one, that's what he said, this is just for Anthony Minghella, pitching is like conducting an autopsy before anyone has died. And what I love about that is that it's true, because people are telling you what is wrong with your project and you haven't even made it. So, you know, we were meeting at Laszlo, meeting with him, talking about one of his projects, and, you know, if I said I was not going to start criticising them because it's not made. But, you know, this is what people are doing, especially sales companies and so on. They're telling you why your project is shit and you haven't even made it. And of course, you know, we have this problem of it being both art and an industry. You know, coming to the end, you'll be glad to hear. This is something that I say to my students mainly, is use other people's brains. I always say, particularly if, like me, you are not so bright yourself, it's really important to align yourself with clever people. You know, I have been very successful at this. You know, with Stephen Woolley, with Richard Branson, and I always thought if I align myself with people who are much cleverer than myself, I'll always do fine in life. And I think in the filmmaking process, it's even more important. So many people, they hire their friends to shoot something, their friends to write it, their friends to do this, their friends to do that. But for me, the most important thing is actually to get the best person to shoot this particular script, the best person to write it. It doesn't matter whether you know them, you don't know them, you have to get the people the best. And I tell my students that, I say you shouldn't crew it just because you either are sleeping with someone or want to sleep with them. You know, you have to crew your movies by who is going to do the best job for you. And this is a nice quote from what's his name, Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a British kind of radio show and book. Said humans are unique in their ability to learn from the experience of others, but are remarkable in their apparent disinclination to do so. So we're able to do it, but we don't want to do it. And and then just a few things to remember. I always say to my students that in every old person, there's a young person screaming, "What the fuck happened?" And I say that to my students because I say, I don't want that to happen. I don't want you to get to my age and have some young person saying, shit, I am not in life where I wanted to be, or indeed where I like being. And it's very, you know. And then this is a very serious quote here, but I think it's a lovely one from Louis Buñuel about the cinematic art. And I can put it all up there, I can read it out for you, though you can read it yourself. This same glass contemplated by a different being can be 1,000 different things, because each one charges what he or she sees with affectivity. No one sees things as they are, but as his desires and his state of soul make him see. I fight for cinema which will show me this kind of glass, because this cinema will always give me an integral vision of reality, will broaden my knowledge of things and people, will open to me the marvellous world of the unknown, of all that which I find neither in the newspaper nor in the street. In other words, if you can have it for real life, why go watch the cinema for it? It has to do more than just reflect real life. And that's just my final little thing. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to hide the bodies of those people I had to kill because they pissed me off. Thank you.